All right, review of the digestive system. Digestion starts in the oral cavity. So we have our dentition and our teeth, as well as our tongue. We have three salivary glands: submandibular gland, sublingual gland, and parotid gland. So the teeth are for mechanical digestion, so breaking down the food. The saliva from the salivary glands helps lubricate the food to create what we're going to call the food bolus. The saliva also contains enzymes like amylases to digest carbohydrates and lingual lipase to digest fats. The food bolus is then moved to the back of the throat by the tongue. In the pharynx, we have three constrictor muscles, superior, middle, and inferior, which are going to contract and push food towards the superior esophagus. During the swallow reflex, the epiglottis closes down over the larynx, so no food can be aspirated into the trachea, and then food is pushed into the esophagus. The upper one third of the esophagus is mostly skeletal muscle. Middle one third starts transitioning, so it's skeletal muscle and smooth muscle, and the inferior one third is all smooth muscle. Now, the esophagus has to pass through the diaphragm, and that's a site where we can have movement of the stomach into the thoracic cavity and get things like hiatal hernias. But in normal physiologic conditions, everything should be fine. So food's propulsed through the esophagus and then into the stomach. So it's to pass through the lower esophageal sphincter. So lower esophageal sphincter's job is to prevent reflux or regurgitation of stomach contents back into the esophagus. Now, once the food bolus enters the stomach, it starts to being mechanically and chemically digested. So you can see the parts of the stomach on the right. So the cardia is the first portion when food enters the stomach. The fundus is the little cap, which is usually facing to the left. The body is the largest portion of the stomach, and the pylorus is the part of the stomach tapering down towards the duodenum. Now, in the stomach, we have a number of cells. So parietal cells make hydrochloric acid. That's why the stomach's pH ranges from 1.8 to 3.5 under normal conditions. Parietal cells also make intrinsic factor, which we know we need to absorb vitamin B12. Chief cells release pepsinogen, which gets converted to pepsin, the active form, but helps digest proteins. But this only happens if the pH is, 3.5 or less. G cells make gastrin. Gastrin stimulates the stomach to produce more secretions. And we also have mucus cells producing lots of mucus, because obviously this is a mucous membrane lining the stomach to protect the stomach against its own acids. So then the food is now called chyme as it enters the duodenum. So the duodenum receives 2 to 5 milliliter, basically small squirts of this chyme from the stomach. Now we can only handle a little bit at a time because we have to, number one, neutralize this acid, right? So we need bicarbonate to neutralize the acid coming from the pancreas. And we need bile and digestive enzymes to start working on this food. So we can't have a large dump of chyme into the duodenum. So how this is controlled is by enteroendocrine hormones. So special cells in the duodenum called enteroendocrine cells produce a number of hormones. We're just going to talk about three of the main ones. So CCK stands for cholecystokinin. So cholecystokinin is going to be what stimulates bile release from the gallbladder and pancreatic enzyme release from the pancreas, right? So we're getting the bile, which helps emulsify fats. So we can see the bile contains bile salts, the active ingredient basically, bilirubin, cholesterol, water, and electrolytes. And from the pancreas, we have amylases, proteases, and lipases, or pancreatic lipase, to work on carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and that's going to enter the duodenum. Also, secretin is going to stimulate the pancreas to release bicarb, so the bicarbonate-rich fluid to help neutralize the acid. So those are the most important things right there that are happening in regards to actual digesting the chyme. Okay. Also, so CCK relaxes something called the sphincter of Oddi. So we can see in our biliary tree and our pancreatic duct there. So the biliary tree starts with the right and left hepatic ducts from the main each lobe. They come together from the common hepatic duct. The common hepatic duct meets the cystic duct, which is coming from the gallbladder, to form the common bile duct. So all that bile is then get drained at the point called the ampulla vator, which is a raised area on the duodenum. This is also where the main pancreatic duct meets as well. And this is where the bicarb and digestive enzymes from the pancreas are also going to enter the duodenum, so the ampulla vator. Now, in the ampulla vator, we have a muscular sphincter called the sphincter of Oddi, ODDI. So CCK is going to cause that sphincter of Oddi to relax. We need that to relax for these fluids and bicarb and bile and digestive enzymes to enter the duodenum. So CCK helps that to relax. And that's where we can get all kinds of problems. If we have gallstones that enter the biliary tree or block the pancreatic duct, we'll have serious problems. Now, secretin also tells the liver to produce more bile. And then we can talk about our third hormone, glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1. So this will circulate to the hypothalamus, where we have our satiety center, and it will decrease hunger, telling us we're full. It will slow down gastric emptying. Again, we don't want a big dump of that chyme into the duodenum. And it's also going to help the endocrine pancreas, not just the exocrine pancreas. It's going to stimulate the beta cells in the islets of Langerhans to release insulin. So it's telling the beta cells, hey, we have food coming. There's going to be blood glucose, start producing insulin. And that's why the drugs like Ozempic and Mounjaro, tirzepatide, they're GLP-1 agonists, they're going to have these similar effects. So they're good for diabetics. They're designed for diabetics, not for weight loss, because it's going to help the beta cells to produce insulin, not all the time, creating hypoglycemia, but just in response to food entering the duodenum, which is perfect. So very good for type 2 diabetes. So all these contents get dumped into the duodenum, okay? And that's very well controlled by these enteroendocrine hormones. And then food then moves on from the duodenum to the rest of the alimentary canal. So next, the jejunum and the ileum, the second two parts of the small intestine. This is where we have absorption. So food's propulsed to these tubes. We also have a second one called segmentation, where we cinch off two areas. We move this chyme back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and we'll have absorption. We'll see a second video on that. So at the end of the ileum, we need to pass this to the large intestine. So this goes through a little valve called the ileocecal valve because it's between the ileum and the cecum, which is the first part of the large intestine. Off the cecum, we can see the variform appendix. Usually it's kind of moving the other way, but whatever. So the variform appendix, so if something gets down into the appendix, it gets inflamed, it can rupture. So that's appendicitis. So the order of the large intestine, so cecum, ascending colon on the right side, transverse colon going through the transverse plane, moving from right to left in the body. That 90-degree turn is called the hepatic flexure because it's the liver in the right upper quadrant. Then on the left, there's another 90-degree turn called the splenic flexure because the spleen's there. We have the descending colon on the left side of the body, the sigmoid colon, which is an S-shaped, and that ends in the rectum. We have an internal anal sphincter made of smooth muscle and an external anal sphincter made of skeletal muscle, and then we have removal from the body. So the colon's big function is reabsorption of water and electrolytes. It's its main function. So we don't want too slow of transit time because then the feces will become dry and impacted. We want too quick of transit time because we don't have time to absorb all that water and we have watery stools and diarrhea.